Wasted money on cures, forgot how to fix myself. They say that time is free, then why is it so precious? Oh, I'll say memories in my head, like Polaroids on walls. They remind you to look ahead. Time is running out. Time is running out. Lately I've lost my track. I've sailed the deeper seas, hoping to find something to bring back better times. Oh, I'll say memories in my head, like Polaroids on walls. They remind you to look ahead. But time is running out. 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 Time is running. Time is running out. But time is running out. What if my best days are over? They can be over. They can't be over now. Time is running out. What if my best days are over? They can't be over now. Time is running out. Time is running out. Time is running out.
Well, the lyrics of the song say time is running out, but of course there's plenty of time between now and the exams, which I think kick off on the 18th of May. Everybody's looking forward to that. Welcome to our latest live revision session. Our focus switches back to micro today, and we're going to do a session on externalities. So it might be handy to have your revision notes available if you want to add in the odd bit of examples, application to what you've already got. We've got some questions for you, some multiple choice, some short answer questions, lots more besides. And I'm going to try and give you a feel and a flavour for the kind of issues and topical areas that might appear in your papers. So our focus is on externalities. Before we start, a quick reminder that we are heading back to our live events. After Easter, we're in Portsmouth, Bristol, Birmingham, and back in London again. We had a week there last week, which was fabulous fun. If you want to come to one of our live grade booster workshops, just go to tutortube.net/workshops for all the details. It's great fun, really intensive day, and you get a fantastic online course as well. Okay, here we go. Let's start our focus on externalities. Hit the subscribe button if you want to comment in the chat, and we'll do our best to highlight some great answers on the screen as we go through. Those of you watching on replay, just press the pause button when you want to have a go at a question. Now, with externalities, it is important to be clear what each exam board requires. I've just chosen the 3 main exam boards. For AQA, you need to know all 4 of the externalities diagrams, and we'll cover them in this session. Edexcel, you only need to know the diagrams for negative production and positive consumption externalities. OCR, all 4 diagrams needed. But Edexcel fans and students, if you use the 4 diagrams and build them correctly, accurately into your analysis and discussion, you will be credited. So my students, I do Edexcel, for example, and my students are taught all 4 diagrams. because they're kind of useful. Let's make a start. So we have, first of all, a give me two. Can you please give me two of your favorite, best examples of negative production externalities? Have a go. Terrific start there. As Henry's answer, CO2 emissions in production, oil leakages in lakes and bodies of water. I think we have to be a little bit careful here about production and consumption externalities. Often you get both, but this is externalities or spillover effects that create external costs that arise from production of goods and services. Bertie talks about topical issue, the waste sewage going into rivers and oceans from water companies. Highly topical, Bertie. We'll talk about that in this session, actually. Here are my two examples coming up on the screen now. So farming, according to some estimates, UK farming now causes about a quarter of particle pollution in cities. So organophosphates used in fertilizers, discharges into rivers. The farming sector is a major cause of ground and air pollution. And a really good example is pollution from factories, chemical factories. The famous 3M factory in Antwerp, they did a study there where toxins in the water and the soil close to that factory caused serious long-term health problems for the local population. And of course, it's very hard to measure the human cost of these things. Have another one. Can you please give me two examples, your best examples of negative consumption externalities? Have a go. I think Charlie was hinting that watching last night's Chelsea-Liverpool game was an example of a negative externality of consumption. I only watched the second half, and so I think the final score was 0-0, but I don't know what the halftime score was. I might go back and watch that a bit later on. Rosetta has a great answer, one of our regulars, smoking and people on the train eating a hot pasty in rush hour. Very interesting. Good example there. Consumption externality, of course, when there are negative spillovers from the consumption of a good or service. And Ken, here's my answers coming up. This is, of course, an area of the spec where there's so many applied examples. And here we go. Plastic waste. The plastic waste that comes from the consumption of ready meals, wet wipes, of course, fatbergs. The Greenpeace survey comes out every year. They now reckon that plastic packaging disposal tops 100 billion pieces a year globally. And a lot of people mention smoking. Really good example there. Passive smoking, the inhalation of secondhand smoke, often associated with respiratory infections, pneumonia, bronchitis, cost to the NHS, and that's often affecting people who've never smoked in their lives. Single-use plastic, of course, would be a particularly detailed aspect of plastic waste. Keep in mind with plastic waste that there are positive externalities as well in terms of food preservation and reducing food waste. So it's a kind of a good example of a mixed externality. Next one, please. Over to you. There are some great answers today in chat. We have a fantastic community. What can you do here? Examples, please, of positive production externalities. 30 seconds. Okay, this is perhaps the one externality where students find it a little harder to think of examples that of the spillovers that come directly from production. So in other words, it tends to lower costs for other firms, other suppliers, other agents in markets. Martin talks about vaccines. Well, of course, you consume vaccines, and there are externalities from vaccine consumption. There might be positive externalities from vaccine development. We'll come back to that in a second. Humphrey talks about research and development. Toby's point here, an airport will benefit local businesses because of the increased accessibility. And we're getting closer, I think. Toby's answer gets us closer to positive externalities. There's Humphrey's point, R&D, research and development, first aid training and offices. Here are my two examples. Oftentimes, infrastructure spending. So if you have better telecoms, better transport, improved rail networks and things, that reduces delays and lowers costs for other firms. The transportation sector, logistics firms experience lower costs. And another really good example comes from sort of digital industries, the open source software movement. So you develop some code that might even be through ChatGPT-4. You develop some software, some coding, and you make it freely available to other people. And that, of course, can have quite a positive spillover effect. And then there's R&D. R&D is a really good example of production externalities, particularly development of material science and especially things like vaccine platforms. So the mRNA platform, which developed the vaccines very quickly, clearly had a significant production externality for many, many businesses. Okay, last one. You're doing really well on this. Can you just give me two examples, your best examples, your favorite examples, please, of positive consumption externalities? 30 seconds. Musical Journey talks about eating healthily and going to the gym, perhaps even eating healthily whilst at the gym. You could double the externality effects there. Yeah, this is where your consumption generates a positive spillover for other people. There's a private cost and a benefit to you, but there's also an external benefit to other people. Robbie there links eating healthy foods and the link to the NHS. The Riddler talks about the SAS training course, personal protective courses, etc. And Anonymous watching a Man U game. And of course, everybody watching a Man U game has to be pretty anonymous in the first place. Here are my two examples. Thanks for those, by the way. Some good examples here. Things like libraries, museums. I saw a video yesterday, a rather wonderful, life-affirming video of the main central library in Manchester, which was absolutely packed full of students revising for their GCSEs and their exams. And it was rather wonderful. Every time I go past a library that's closed, a little bit of me dies. So libraries, museums, open spaces makes a huge positive externality, particularly people taking training courses in libraries and things. And also, of course, the pandemic. So the take-up of vaccines and wearing face masks, I think a good example is there's a cost and benefit to you, but there's a wider external benefit. And Joe Beagles, the great Joe Beagles, says, watching Harry Brook under the Bazball era and watching a GT2 live stream. Joe, you've picked out two of the most obvious, important, significant externalities there could ever possibly be. But how do you value that? How do you measure that? Okay, let's move on. I've got 5 multiple choice questions for you. They're all past questions. Have a look at this. My picture seems to be in the way of the question, but not to worry. The government wishes to reduce the negative externalities caused by using coal. Which policy should the government use? So I've got 5 multiple choice questions for you. Let's see if you can get 5 out of 5. So which policy should the government use? Answers are already coming through. Shahil says C and Freya says C. Flora C. Casper says C. A load of people saying C. Let's double check. And the answer is indeed C. So instead of taxing the bad, you can subsidise the good. Although wind-powered electricity, of course, creates mixed externalities in its own right. Monty says C all the way. And Monty, you're right. Now, this is a harder question. Here it comes. Question number 2. The private benefit of an activity is greater than the private cost, but the social benefit of the same activity is less than the social cost. Now, given that information, what must be true of the activity? Private benefit is greater than private cost. The social benefit, however, is less than the social cost. What do we reckon? So a little bit of a difference of opinion as people think this one out. There's no maths involved, so you've got to try to work out the inequalities there. A lot of people are saying B, quite a few people saying C. So Khalid says C. Noah says it's B. A couple of people think it's B. Arthur thinks it's C, and Josh thinks it's C. So let's check the answer. Well, for the social benefit to be less than the social cost, it must be the case that the external cost is bigger than the external benefit, because that's going to drive up the social cost, isn't it? So initially, private benefit greater than private cost, but you end up with social benefit being less than social cost. So there must have been some significant external costs for that to be the case. Question number 3. Well done if you got that right, by the way. Now, this is a really good question. The diagram shows the costs and benefits of using a good. The good has negative externalities in production and positive externalities in consumption. Free market equilibrium is at X. What's the new equilibrium point when the externalities are taken into account? What do we think here? So lots of lines, lots of points. Just to give you a clue, the answer is either A, B, C, or D. Hope that helps. So positive externalities in consumption, negative externalities in production. Now, a lot of people here are saying B. Consensus seems to be B, from Paddy, from Alfie, from Bonnie. Few people saying D. Few people saying it's never been taught. Let's check our answer. The answer is indeed B. Yes. Negative externalities in production, MSC, you shift up MSC, but there were positive externalities in consumption, so you move to MSB1 instead of MSB2. So it's that combination of MSC1 and MSB1 giving point B. 2 more questions. Just pointing out that Merlin was very unlucky when he chose a different answer. Too many flights in the airline industry cause unnecessary damage to the environment. 2 right. Which measure is most likely to result in a move towards the social optimum number of flights? So think about pollution, CO2 emissions from aviation. Which of those measures, A, B, C, and D, is likely to move towards the social optimum? Now, the key word here is towards. You don't necessarily get there. Answers coming through. Thank you for those. We've nearly 300 people in the live stream, which is fabulous. Lots of recognizable names. People have been with us all year, actually, on the live streams, which is fantastic. Here's the answer coming up. And the answer is D. A couple of people chose A. And of course, if you have a complete ban, you go beyond the social optimum, don't you? Basically, output goes to 0. Of course, that's not the idea. The idea is to take into account the externalities. And here's our final question on multiple choice coming up now. Again, diagram question. Diagram shows private costs and benefits of production in a free market that would result in market failure. Here's the question. Which change in output would be necessary to overcome the market failure? I'll take a moment on this. This is probably the harder of the 5 questions. So you get this right, you're in great shape. Which change in output is necessary to overcome the market failure? So think about where the private free market point is and where you want to be when it's social optimum. A lot of answers coming through. A couple of people choosing D from N to L. More people, I guess, are choosing C. A few people choosing B from M to N. What do we think? A lot of people saying C, including Eva and Arhan, Rob Galbraith, Jamie Taylor and Jamie Whaley. Here we go. Here's the answer coming up. It is C, M to L. M is where marginal private cost and benefit intersect. That's the free market equilibrium. We want to be at L, where MSB meets MSC. So you need to reduce the output from M to L. Excellent. Right, next bit. Let's just think about one topical issue. There's so many issues we could talk about, and the examiner will choose an issue. I'm just going to choose something that's been in the news for the last few years, and it's this one. Just basically a quick report there on the Environmental Audit Committee from Parliament. Huge report came out in 2021, actually. Exam was created in 2022 about this huge issue of discharge, both from farming, intensive chicken farms, and water companies. Now, that is so topical, somebody mentioned right at the start. So, moving on to the next slide, can you please give me in the chat 3 examples of negative externalities caused by chicken farms and water companies? Try to make them as specific as possible to get the application marks. Have a go. This came up in the live sessions last week. An application doesn't have to be data, but if you can make something very specific and identify an external cost. So we talked about, Callum talks about health problems in the community, destruction of habitats, visual pollution. That's good application, Callum. Well done on that one. Let's try and pick up another one. So look, Jamie has a great point here. Health problems and environmental issues such as dying habitats and fish. And Robbie Thompson is very good. Robbie's one of our top community contributors. Talks about the harm to aquatic life, microplastics in water from wet wipes, unhygienic areas of the river. The crucial point here is that we're focusing on the leakages of chemicals and the raw sewage. So the more specific you can make it, the better. But this was a really good, nice one. Judy, if you get a question on chicken farms, just wing it. First person I ever taught, is now CEO of Nando's. According to the Angling Trust, here are my examples coming up. According to the Angling Trust, the estimated cost of raw sewage pollution to the UK economy was £1.5 billion in 2020. 1.5 billion. Lots of anglers reeling from the effects of contaminated water. So make it specific. The health risks, community sickness, polluted water, increasing the burden on the NHS, loss of biodiversity in the area, and of course the wider economic impact. Huge consequences for tourist areas, close to rivers, on beaches and things, impact on house prices. So the application, the analysis is the diagram. The application is just thinking about a good example that might be relevant. And let's, on the similar vein, let's think about the next challenge, which is this. Coming up on the screen. Can you please give me 3 interventions that might be effective in curbing the dumping of raw sewage into rivers? What can we come up with? Alex contributes the idea that you should raise fines for breaking regulations to a level high enough that impacts their revenues. I think they can fine them up to 10% of turnover. They rarely have, actually. Eleanor talks about anti-dumping laws, pollution permits. Great point, Ella. Regulation to monitor behaviour. As soon as you mention pollution permits, that leads you down an interesting avenue. Subsidies to treat sewage. Bobby comes in there with a point about subsidies, which is quite useful. By the way, Ofwat has fined just one water company since in the last 30 years. One big fine. On an average, raw sewage was pumped into rivers 825 times a day in the UK last year. Staggering. The Riddler. We can always rely on the Riddler to come up with a brilliant economics point. Armed security to watch sewage workers. It's the obvious point in the Riddler, and I'm surprised that nobody has come up with that before. Here are my points. Thanks for those. Superb. Yeah, long-term. Think long-term, short-term. By the way, if you're watching on replay, maybe take a screenshot of these points, and you can always press the pause button, can't you? If you're watching live, still take a screenshot. So the best evaluation is those that think short-term, long-term. The UK's sewage infrastructure is not fit for purpose, both in London and around the UK. So you need to build greater capacity sewage treatment plants, storm management capacity. But then the issue is who should fund it. And that raises interesting questions about state versus private ownership and funding. A lot of people talk about unlimited fines, but do fines have much impact? And maybe get the CEOs of these water companies to live next to a discharge area. The Romans used to get the engineers to sleep under their bridges for a year after they designed them. And then, of course, the other one is people talked about permits. You can have a pollution tax. So if you can measure the degree of sewage pollution, can you tax them? Of course, that internalizes the externality, but is a tax effective? Okay, now this next bit is super important. Let's move on. For higher analysis in your exams, if you get an externalities question, please always try to show the deadweight welfare loss. So I've got 4, we're going to go through in this next couple of minutes with you, 4 externalities diagrams. And all I want to do is to identify the area of deadweight loss of social welfare. And in particular, I've just moved the letters around a little bit. So here we go. Here are your 4 externalities diagrams. Let's spend a few minutes going through them. This one is negative production externality. Can somebody have a go? Type into the chat window the area of welfare loss. It'll be 3 letters. Let's see who can get this right. So the Riddler straight in, Harry Brooks is pretty good. Oh, wow. A lot of people saying CNA, which is interesting because there is no N. ACE, ACE. Okay, pretty good. Let's look at the answer. So the answer is, sorry, there's no answer. The answer is CEA. Here's my second one. So I am not putting the answers on the screen. I'll just tell you the answers. Now here's negative. So the answer there is CEA or ACE. Next one, next slide. Positive production externalities. I've just tweaked the letters. Can somebody show me the welfare loss from positive production externalities? So you're hoping there's going to be the private optimum is going to be at point A. Where does society want to be? So what's the, okay, Harvey and Rob, Casper, Ben, all getting it right. Yep, good. The answer there is ACF or AFC. Well done. Here's our third diagram. Positive consumption externalities, please. Positive consumption externalities. Which area shows the welfare loss? By the way, thank you to everybody posting in chat. It makes a huge difference to our session. But you don't have to post, just check your own answers and things. Okay. So this is positive consumption externalities. And most people are getting the right answer. The private optimum is Q1. The social optimum is Q2. And therefore the market failure is the underconsumption. And the deadweight loss is ACE or CAE again. Okay. Potential welfare gain if you overcome the underconsumption. Well done. And one more. Negative consumption externalities. What do we think on this one? Negative. I've kept the letters the same this time. Negative consumption externalities, which is the welfare loss. Now, in this case, you're probably over-consuming from a social welfare point of view. You want to be probably at, Q1, but you end up at Q2. And Charlie and Alex, and Zane, Drew, excellent. You've all got the right answers. This is superb. AEF, because you're over-consuming. So there's a loss of welfare. Potential welfare loss of AEF. Well done. Superb. Make sure those are labeled in the exam, please. It makes such a difference. Okay, let's just quickly look in the time we have left, 5 or 7 minutes, at carbon trading. Now, carbon trading is really interesting. And it's, I think, one of the interesting things that's happened just in the last year or two. So it could be on the minds of the examiners. This is the daily price of carbon permits in the European Union system. And it's increased substantially. Again, if you're an examiner, carbon price was way too low for many, many years. Then it kind of went up in 2018, 2019, dipped a bit in the early stages of the pandemic. But since then, it's climbed. It's now touching €100 per ton. Now that is, I think, significant. Here's my little 60-second challenge for you. Can you please have a go, and we'll post some answers on the screen. Have a go for 60 seconds at typing your best explanation of how carbon trading is designed to reduce emissions. 60 seconds, do your best. Here we go. Wow, and Jim, my producer for the day, is very kindly putting up some super answers on the screen, and there are a few more coming in as the minute clock ticks away. It's not easy to write a short explanation in a minute. Here's Rosetta's answer. It brings emissions within the market mechanism pre-hand, so that firms want to make money off their permits, so they don't pollute. They can sell it on, or polluters have to pay for their pollution. Yes, if you're a really efficient firm, you'll end up with surplus permits that you can sell. That becomes revenue to you. If you're a very inefficient firm, you have to keep going to the market to buy permits. It becomes an extra cost. Here's Bertie's answer. Carbon trading will create a private marketplace whereby only those who can afford to and need to use excessive amounts of carbon, and others will sell their credits to these companies. That's a lovely explanation. Really love that one. Humphrey talks about incentivizes firms to increase investment in greener options. Somtu has a really good answer, I think. Let's just see if we can bring up Somtu's answer coming up on the screen. So Humphrey there talks about carbon permits have a sum of carbon that's lower than the existing levels. Here we go. The money that could be gained by selling permits is an opportunity cost of using the permit to produce. It's more profitable for firms to sell their permits than use them for production. So you've got a decision to make as a business, you know. Are you going to invest in low carbon technologies? Depends on what the permits cost you and also how much output you get from the permit. The little challenge here in this section was and I'll do this in your revision actually, take any topic, write about it for a minute. What can you write in a minute? Longhand or typing, but what can you write in a minute? Robbie had a great answer there. If we can bring Robbie's answer back up. I'll show before I show you mine. So Robbie Thompson had an answer which was about it incentivizes companies to be greener like that and reduce the carbon footprint with a cash reward, but helps businesses who cannot reduce carbon footprint to spend money fixing the environment. Here's my answer. Now, this probably took me a little bit more than 1 minute, so a little bit of a cheat. But I just wanted to capture for the essence of it. Carbon trading creates a market for carbon permits. Firms that emit more carbon than they're allowed to must buy credits from companies that emit less. Now, crucially, the supply of permits is capped, gradually reduced. That drives the price up. That increases the marginal private cost of production and therefore creates an incentive for businesses to commit money to low carbon technologies. The diagram, just a little bit word about the diagrams coming up on the next slide. You can use supply and demand diagrams if you get a question about carbon trading. You might be asked to. You don't have to use an externalities diagram. But my strong advice to you this summer is develop the diagram. Shift at least 2 curves to get to the higher levels of analysis. So here's my market for carbon permits. I've shifted the supply to the left from S1 to S2. Fewer permits increases scarcity. Humphrey's point about driving the price up. And I've also shown demand for permits might be higher in 2021 than 2020. Economy's growing, coming out of the pandemic, industry's opening up again. So the demand for permits goes up, set against a weaker, lower supply that drives the price up to 75 euros. That will be a developed diagram because you've shifted 2 curves, the supply curve to reduce the total carbon and the demand curve reflecting the cyclical nature of the economy. That will be the kind of diagram I would draw if you had a question on carbon permits. Well done, superb answers. Just one more. give me two. Can you just think in terms of evaluation now? Can you please give me two downsides, limitations, or drawbacks of carbon trading as a policy to cut emissions? Have a go, 30 seconds. Wow, in 30 seconds, everybody here is so quick that you know your stuff. It's very exciting that as a group, the Tutor2 Collective is working overtime and producing some great points. There's Bertie coming in with carbon trading erodes any social incentives. That's possibly right. I think it'd be a little bit more specific about carbon trading at the system itself. Oh yeah, okay. Here's Jamie's point. Those companies who aged high carbon footprint or have a carbon can just obtain carbon permits and carry on producing. A lot of companies are profitable, and they just say, right, fair enough, we'll buy these permits. We will carry on producing. Although, of course, the supply of permits, Jamie, does fall each year. So the total pollution, in theory, should be reducing. That's the idea of cap and trade. The cap comes down each year. Here are my 2 points that might be useful if you got your carbon trading notes. Maybe add these 2 points to your notes. First of all, the price is volatile. That chart, remember that chart we showed you a few minutes ago? Pretty volatile. High at the moment, €100, but hasn't been €100 since it was introduced. Volatility is a barrier to investment because it's cause of risk for businesses. You might think you might invest in low carbon technologies, but the price of carbon drops to €50. Whereas a carbon tax is more certain. Businesses know how much tax they're going to have to pay. So trading gives you the market incentives, but the price is a bit volatile. And a really key point is carbon leakage. Now, carbon leakage occurs when businesses move or outsource production to other countries with lower carbon prices, form of arbitrage really, to avoid paying for carbon credits. They may well shift production to emerging countries, developing countries with lower emission standards. And there's a fundamental point here. We simply cannot tackle climate change without helping developing countries to reduce their emissions. But who's going to pay for these countries to move towards net zero? Just a couple of points on evaluation, just by way of closing. Hopefully this will be useful. You often get questions about interventions. I use the 3 E's when I'm on this part of the syllabus. 1, which policies do you think are most effective? Carbon trading versus carbon tax, minimum price for solar panel makers versus a subsidy, which are most effective in the short and the long run. Secondly, do interventions achieve efficiency, allocative, productive, dynamic, social? Thirdly, really important, can interventions lead to an inequitable outcome? Who are the winners and losers from a policy such as a carbon tax? Can markets find their own solutions? Can agents come to their own bargaining solutions? A kind of coast theorem idea. And critically, how and why might intervention possibly lead to government failure? Let's just try one more multiple choice question because this group is too good. So here is my tough multiple choice question. The government intends to use pollution permits to reduce environmental damage. Under what circumstances is this policy most likely to fail? What do we think? This is another past exam question. Government intends to use tradable permits. Under what circumstances is this policy most likely to fail to achieve the intended reduction? What do we think on this one? This was a 2021 question. And within a few seconds, the Tutor2 Collective is producing some fabulous answers. Most people, I think everybody's saying A, Danny and Robbie and Paddy and Freya and Lucy. Here we go. Here's the answer. Correct. So your cap is set too high to be effective and therefore less efficient as a way of reducing emissions. One more slide, everybody, just in terms of what I'm not question spotting here. That's a mug's game. But these are just some things to be aware of that might be in the minds of the examiner. So please maybe take a screenshot or just jot down the odd example. The European Union just recently, within the last year, announced a new carbon border tax, putting tariffs on products with high CO2 emissions. Interesting form of protectionism with environmental credentials. Of course, this time last year, the UK brought in the new plastic packaging tax for producers. That could be an exam question. The surge in carbon permit prices we talked about, now up to €100 per tonne. Is the system now working? Maybe externalities from vaping, including single use. Another topic in the news last year was the decision eventually to open or create a new Cumbrian coal mine. Does that go against our net zero ambitions? The mixed externalities, positive and negative externalities associated with electric vehicles and battery production. In particular, where's the electricity coming from, and how and why are batteries produced? What are the externalities from that? And also there could be a question on housing, mixed externalities from increased house building, particularly as new technologies allow us to build housing with a slightly greener footprint. I mean, the construction industry is trying, in a dynamic sense, to lower its carbon footprint. There we go, everybody. 35 minutes on externalities. Well done, some fantastic answers. Just a quick reminder, thanks Louis, that'll pay for my coffee. Quick reminder that we have our study books. Here they are. Probably got noise in there. So we have our fantastic study books for AQA and Excel, 4 books for Excel, 4 books for AQA. They are quite brilliant actually for scribbling and highlighting and just working away. Together they form an ideal study revision resource available from us. Or if you go on Amazon Prime account, order it today, you'll probably get it tomorrow. So they are really, really good. There we go. Fantastic session. Thank you to the hundreds who joined us live. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, we'd be super proud if you pressed like. It does help other people find us a little bit more easily. Tomorrow, we're doing a really important session on the balance of payments. That wasn't on the exam for some examples last year, could well appear this year. So we're doing balance of payments tomorrow. Look forward to that. Please spread the word about our sessions. Let's try and get 500 people if we can, one of our sessions this week. But for now, stay happy, stay positive, stay curious, and see you sometime soon.